I want to look on divorce versus non-divorce, and its impact on children's mental health. So my abstract, it's pretty much the compressed part of my paper. What I decided to talk about and label of what was the most important things was comparing children of. I wanted to compare divorced children versus non-divorced children. I want to focus on anxiety, depression, and attachment. See if that information fluctuated depending on if a child went through a divorce. If not, I'd also as a quantitative cross-sectional design. I'm looking at two different groups. Those who are not, those who are, and looking at the length and the process it takes to get to this required for me to do a cross-sectional design. And one thing I wanted to do is also, when I want to label this, is I predict that my hypothesis is I predict that children who have been through a divorce have worse outcomes than those who have not. Now, my intro, I'm looking at the divorce, and I believe that divorce affects a large number of children. This is a big part I hit on in my paper. I want to look at divorce and levels of divorce and kind of paint the picture of from other parts of research that I found that divorce is something that's true and real, that really does affect children. I also wanted to link it, so through articles and information that's support and back the information that backs what divorce looks like and how divorce kind of shapes and molds children. And I also kind of spoke about in a part of my intro how it also impacts academics and social development. So my research question is, how does parental divorce affect children's mental health versus non-divorced children? Then I wanted to look at, during my research, I want to look at social anxiety, depression, and parental attachment. These are things that focal points I hit on as I went through my paper. I discussed finding information and articles that were supporting it. There's articles that even support the information for my research question that there is some weight to the social anxiety aspect, depression aspect, and the parental attachment. These things can be shown through research that I have found, articles that I have read when looking at my research question. Now, this screen is kind of dark. I wanted to mix it up. From my hypothesis, I believe they're going to have higher social anxiety with children divorced, high levels of depression, and likelihood to have a greater insecure attachment. When I was looking at the attachment theory, I really believe that this is a possibility and something that's true. Not only true, but research kind of backs up the idea of the possibility of insecure attachment being kind of greater and shown in children who have went through divorce and having weak how would I say this? Weak relationships with family or parents. So during my literature review, I looked at divorce and how it affects academic performance, how it increases behavior issues, the emotional distress and instability it brings along. Also look at the prevalence of divorce, reasons for divorce, information supporting this, outcomes for children and adults, even what are the emotional facts, what is depression, what does anxiety look like, what is parental attachment, and also kind of criticize the articles and information to show that even though they may speak about the prevalence, but they don't speak about how there's a need in the study for how can we avoid parents from getting divorced. Even for the reasons for divorce, the idea of promoting marital classes for those who are seeking divorce, also for those who are getting married and who have a family, to help find a way to build that relationship and build that connection, so to try to reduce the outcomes. And I feel like not enough research I feel like research has been done, but not enough research, and that's why I feel like my topic is valid, and I feel like my topic is valid and something that should be further studied and further researched. More information should be able to be found in supporting how there's a need to see that students who are not students but children who are going through divorce, they are affected by that relationship strain. That they are not only affected, they can form depression, they can form social anxiety, they can form insecure attachment. Now, I also made sure not to try to keep myself from being biased. I also keep myself from being biased, but also show that there is a difference that can be between for two-parent households. They have better academic achievement, improvement in emotional regulation, and strong social development. When I look at mental health factors that affect children, it was depression, the scaredness, fatigue, and loss of interest. When it comes to anxiety, there's a fear, worry, avoidance of behaviors. There's also increased prevalence among youth, from being incarcerated to being sexually active. Like, these things are apparent, and this is why I believe my research needs to be done, because most studies looked at the prevalence, looked at other parent households. I wanted to narrow mine down and look at 3 groups and try to keep it as strict and as similar as possible, so I can try to grab accurate and some sturdy data. I'll go through more as I go through my presentation. Also look at attachment styles, from secure is healthy, anxiety is not, avoidant is emotional distance, and divorce is linked to insecurity. So, understanding this, I'm looking at this from attachment styles. This is possibly if they don't have a good bond with their family or their mom or their mother or father in their relationship, they could be a possibility of forming this. But also going through divorce, this can have one secure and one insecure with a parent, which will can drive and kind of create this issue and this mess for a child when they may be secure with their mom but insecure with their dad. They may be anxious avoided with their dad or anxious avoided with their mom, depending on what relationship. So children are caught in between and kind of left in the zone of what is right and what is wrong. From a methodology, I decided I wanted to go with 2 groups. I went to 3 groups. Pretty much also comparing 2 groups, but I'm looking at white, Spanish, and Black from ages 6 to 12. That will be our participants. 6 to 12. I want to look at middle class, gender. I want to look at race, ethnicity. After looking at ethnicity, their ethnicity. I wanted to look at those aspects and keep it narrow. Questions and a survey I will send out, and I'll collect that data, scratch out those who are divorced. Then from there, the next idea would be shifter and have the children and parents take some of the inventory tests and use of tools that I've prescribed and did research on, supporting that these things, that the instruments that I'm using will allow for us to see what depression looks like, what social anxiety looks like, and what are children's attachment levels, what are the attachment styles children are having that are in divorce or non-divorce. So these are my measurements. I used the Ender multidimensional anxiety scale as well for social anxiety. I used the children depression rate scale and the revised depression. This one, the one I use, is similar to the adult attachment instrument. It's just been categories and changed a little bit. The questions changed a little bit just to reflect for children to answer it. I'm using a multi-ANOVA since I have multiple groups that I'm using and I have multiple outcomes there can be multiple outcomes from each different race. I wanted to use a multi-ANOVA, multivariate ANOVA, which will allow me to sit there and be able to pretty much dissect each group and the multivariates that I have. I want to also compare the differences simultaneously and reduce of a type 1 error. My limitations will be, it's a small sample size. I'm only using middle class, and it's also in the state of Quincy, Illinois. Then looking for Black, Hispanic, White. My population size could be small. It should be a broader and bigger for the whole United States, or not for a couple of states. Making a small pop size could be good or bad. Meaning that if my data were to come out positive in a strong grade, that can only be me for Quincy, Illinois. That won't be for other places. There's also limited generalizability. Since it's limited to Quincy, there's only so much information I can gather and collect. Understanding that there has to be a good population. Also, that since I'm only hitting the middle class, that it only makes sense. It kind of doesn't give you room to breathe, because what if I'll be rejecting others. I'll be rejecting others that aren't middle class, even though what if, because research can sit there and show me and tell me that just because they're lower middle class doesn't mean they're a parent, even if they're divorced, meaning that the children is going through depression or having anxiety. But information I have found says that those who want to, they are divorced children and families or moms and dads, when they're separated, can fall into poverty. So that's a possibility. So I wanted to keep it as narrow and straight as possible, but doing that could also skew my data in a way, good or bad way. Also, that's not my conclusion. Divorce impacts children's mental health. Evidence supports increasing risk, and there's a need for a targeted intervention, which will allow for us to sit there and dig deeper into children who are faced with divorce and how we can change lives, help family, and impact others.